is a pretty fun book to read, especially once you get over the fact that it's almost totally disconnected from the previous installment in the series. Welcome back to another episode of the Writer's Review, where today I'm taking a look at Galactic Outlaws, written by Nick Cole and Jason Anspach. Galactic Outlaws is the direct sequel to Legionnaire and is the second book in the 9-volume long Galaxy's Edge series. Like its predecessor, Galactic Outlaws falls firmly in the military sci-fi category, although it makes several changes to the formula established by the previous installment in the series. So if you'd first like to learn more about Legionnaire, you should follow the link up above, although that isn't strictly necessary since Galactic Outlaws also sort of works as a standalone novel. For one, it no longer follows a single point of view character, instead opting to tell its story through multiple point of view characters. These are mostly made up of 3 main characters, as well as a couple minor characters scattered throughout the length of the novel. But in my mind, the most notable changes from Legionnaire can be found in this novel's story, especially since none of the events or characters from the previous book's main storyline have any real tangible impact on the events of Galactic Outlaws, apart from serving as a sort of semi-relevant backstory. With that being said, Galactic Outlaws follows the story of 2 bounty hunters, both with a past in the Legion. The first is an old-school veteran from the Savage Wars, who we've already glimpsed in the epilogue of Legionnaire. He's an outlaw vigilante who travels the fringes of Empire space, dealing out justice as he sees fit. The second bounty hunter, however, is a spry, charismatic hotshot whose only purpose in life seems to be accruing wealth. At the start of the novel, the two are caught up in their own business, but as the story develops, they inevitably get tasked with hunting down the same mysterious individual who's been stirring up trouble all across the galaxy. To find out if they catch this individual and foil his schemes, you'll just have to read the novel for yourself. Now, if we take a look at this novel's subgenre composition, you won't be surprised to find that action forms the backbone of this novel's structure. Like with any good military sci-fi novel, there are plenty action set pieces scattered throughout the length of the novel, although the combat is not on a larger scale as it was with Legionnaire, instead focusing on combat between smaller parties and individuals. In second place is a combination of comedy and drama, which is mostly tied to the younger of the 2 bounty hunters. This mostly takes the form of character-driven humor derived from the bounty hunter's personality, while he goes about interrogating people on his pursuit of his targets. Meanwhile, in a more supportive role, you'll also find philosophical elements. These pop up towards the end of the novel, but since they're very spoilery, I won't go much more into that. Then there's world building, which is mostly tied to setting up the big baddie of this novel, and presumably for the rest of the series, as well as some psychological elements connected to the older of the 2 bounty hunters and his struggles with memory loss, loss of identity, and purpose in life. As far as other notable quirks I think you should be aware of, because of Galactic Outlaws' focus on the 2 bounty hunters, it doesn't really read like your typical military sci-fi novel, instead reading more like a space western. And second, if you've already read Legionnaire and are planning to jump into Galactic Outlaws, just be aware that you might be very much confused if this novel is actually the sequel to Legionnaire, just like I was, and you'll probably only figure out that that is the case when you get to about the 70 or 80% mark. In conclusion, I would say that Galactic Outlaws is a pretty fun book to read, especially once you get over the fact that it's almost totally disconnected from the previous installment in the series. I would say that I did enjoy Galactic Outlaws a bit more than Legionnaire, because it does have a bit of a more diverse cast of characters who are a bit less shallow. If you have any interest in the military sci-fi genre or the Galaxy's Edge universe, then I definitely suggest you pick up this novel. Although, even if you do ignore Legionnaire and the other books in the series, you could still pick up and read Galactic Outlaws as a standalone novel, and I think you'd still have a pretty fun experience without any major gaps in context. If my word isn't enough for you though, I'll have the usual ratings up on screen for you now. If you have any interest in picking up a copy of Galactic Outlaws, you can do so in ebook, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook formats, and the novel comes out at about 90,000 words in length, or 9 hours for the audiobook listeners. As usual, the Kindle edition is the cheapest one by far, coming in at a very satisfying Pi dollars, or $3.14 for the non-math nerds out there, followed by the paperback and hardcover copies at $12 and $25 respectively. For the audiobook listeners out there, there's sadly no Whispersync deal available for Galactic Outlaws. Also, you can only snag the copy of Galactic Outlaws in a bundle together with the audiobook of Legionnaire. Now, if you are thinking of picking up the bundle, I'd suggest just using your Audible credits since you're already getting 2 books for the price of 1, or you can wait for a Audible 2-for-1 sale since the bundle also shows up there. In fact, that's where I bought my copies of these 2 books. Now, since prices might have changed since I recorded this video, I'll have an Amazon link linked in the description below so you can check current pricing on Amazon. That brings us to the end of the spoiler-free section of this review. If you liked what you heard thus far, consider subscribing for more videos in the future. Now, onto the lesson section of this video. In this lesson section, I'll be talking about consistency when it comes to writing a sequel or any other installment in the series of books you might be working on. Now, while I will be pointing out things about this novel that I do disagree with, that isn't to say that the book is objectively bad or that the authors don't know what they're doing. It just means that in my eyes, the book went against some writing principles that I've developed through my own reading and writing. And after that, it's up to you to judge whether you find my logic sound or useful. With that out of the way, let's jump right in. So, when it comes to consistency within a series of books, you've got 2 main things to think about. These are consistency of structure and consistency of narrative. Since you're smart and have watched the video so far, you can probably already guess that with Galactic Outlaws, I'll be talking about consistency of narrative. Now, with consistency of narrative, you again have 2 polarities of problem. A, you're being too consistent, meaning that your characters are literally repeating events from the previous book, almost word by word, and in doing so, you're adding little to nothing to the series story-wise. And option B is that you're not being consistent enough, meaning that the book you're working on has 0 to little connection to the previous installment story-wise. Now, in my mind, Galactic Outlaws suffers from this latter affliction. First off, at the start of the novel, the authors give no indication to the time relationship between this novel and Legionnaire, which left me wondering whether the events of Galactic Outlaws were happening before, during, or after the events of Legionnaire. And I really only got my answer about a third into the book when the Battle of Kublar was mentioned offhandedly during a discussion about the old type of armor Wraith and Rex use. Now, this is a problem because humans in general perceive the world through the logic of cause and effect, and if you take away the time relationships, all of that goes out the window. Therefore, the reader will be put off balance, and they'll be focused on figuring out this time relationship, that's the only thing they'll be focusing on while they're reading, instead of enjoying the book. Kind of like what happened with me. So where does all this ambiguity come from? Well, at the start of the novel, the authors do state that the Legionnaires are nowhere near as good as they used to be, kind of hinting at the fact that the events of this novel are happening after the events of Legionnaire, and I honestly do believe that that was done with that intention. On the other hand, in the epilogue of Legionnaire, the old man also references the golden age of Legionnaires, as well as General Rex, which adds a whole ton of confusion to this Legionnaires used to be better mentality, As well, the fact that Rex is one of the main characters in this novel, with his 1,000-year lifespan, which only gets explained at the very end of the novel, adds a very large amount of confusion. In my case, this left me constantly wondering if this novel was actually a prequel to Legionnaire. So in my mind, had the authors just added a simple 7 years have passed since the Battle of Kublar somewhere at the start of the novel, all of this confusion could have been done away with. And I think that if they had done this, it wouldn't have really impacted the story in any negative way. My second gripe in terms of inconsistency with Galactic Outlaws is due to the fact that there's a complete change of cast of characters from the last book. Okay, yes, technically WRAITH is one of the Legionnaires from Victory Company, but again, that really only gets explained near the end of the novel, so in that sense, there is a complete break in connection with Legionnaire. In my case, I spent the first half of the novel either wondering when one of the characters from the previous book was gonna pop up, or wondering which one of the characters was actually connected to the previous book, namely WRAITH. Although I also got confused whether the engineer princess or the Maydoon girl were actually the princess mentioned in the epilogue of Legionnaire, which only got me more and more confused as the book went on. So what would in my mind be the easiest fix to this problem? Well, just have Galactic Outlaws be the first book in the Galaxy Z series and recategorize Legionnaire as a standalone prequel to the series. Although this is assuming that this same time and character cast jump doesn't happen again with the third book in the series. In that case, maybe even Galactic Outlaws should be recategorized as a standalone prequel, but I haven't started on the third book of the series, so I guess we'll get to find out in the next review in this series. So that wraps up this writer's review. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you liked the video, consider liking, commenting and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next video.